In most versions of the play, the staging to start Scene 3 depicts Kent sleeping in the stocks as Edgar enters. In a soliloquy, Edgar then declares that since he ran away from Edmund, he has been hunted and cannot escape. He lays out his plan to disguise himself as a bedlam beggar and call himself Poor Tom. The context of the play and the history of beggars in Elizabethan times becomes important here to show Shakespeare's criticism of what happens when fathers are blind, sovereigns are disloyal, and siblings act with unnatural ambition. If you are going to mention this context in an essay, you would not just restate that history though. You will need to find keywords and passages to analyse within the scene which draw on audience's emotional and critical responses. Remember to show how you have arrived at your answer through specific analysis of these aesthetic features. In this scene, Edgar flees from civilization, leaving the safety of walls and roofs behind in favour of chaos and the confusion of the natural world. For audiences of Shakespeare's time, the son of an earl committing such an act would have been a big deal. They would have recognised that the supposed safety and rule of law in the court had so diminished that it was better to take chances in the natural and often chaotic world. The removal of Edgar's clothing to become Poor Tom also acts as a metaphorical uncovering of the truth, as we see that Edgar is not dressed in fine robes or shirts, but takes the basest and most poorest shape. Here, Shakespeare also begins to foreshadow the notion that a return to base aspects of humanity must occur in order for this world to be repaired. We'll see more about this in Act 3, so keep an eye out for the repeated imagery and phrasing. In Act 2, Scene 4, Lear arrives at Gloucester's house and cannot believe that Regan and Cornwall would dare to put Kent in the stocks. By characterising Lear as initially baffled and then full of rage, Shakespeare reinforces the buffoonery of his blindness as audiences know the treatment that is coming. Regan and Cornwall refuse to speak with Lear, despite his demands that his middle daughter attend him immediately. The couple excuse themselves on the grounds that they are sick and weary from travelling. Again, Shakespeare's use of dramatic irony tells audiences that his blindness and lack of authority is the fault of his own hubris. Lear insists that they speak to him, and eventually threatens them, then commands them. He has difficulty controlling his emotions, but in this moment, audiences see he finally acknowledges to himself that sickness can make people behave strangely, though he does not yet recognise this as his own flaw. Look to the specific wording of this moment along with the characterisation to create more in-depth and authoritative analysis. When Regan and Cornwall eventually appear, Lear starts to tell Regan about Goneril's sharp-toothed unkindness towards him, expecting Regan to act in kinder and more honourable ways. Again, the construction of the play and the dramatic irony allows audiences to know that he is about to be treated in cold and unwelcoming ways. Regan suggests that Goneril may have been justified and tells Lear to return to her. Lear almost immediately switches off the pleasantries and derides both of his daughters, but especially Goneril. In his moment of rage, audiences see his continued failures as a father and regent, as Lear aims to claw back the loyalty of his middle daughter by telling her that she is better than Goneril, because Regan better knows the offices of nature, bond of childhood, effects of courtesy, dues of gratitude. Thy half of the kingdom hast thou not forgot, wherein I thee endowed. We should immediately be alert to Shakespeare's inclusion of financially based terminology, as this tells us that the outcomes will not be pleasant for Lear, just as they were not when Shakespeare gives Lear such diction in Act 1. Keep looking for this financial diction throughout the play and see how Shakespeare compares and contrasts the imagery as Lear becomes more blind. Let's take a closer look at Lear's outburst against his daughter within this scene to analyse what Shakespeare has to say about blind actions, filial ingratitude, parent-child relationships, madness, and ageing without wisdom, amongst other concepts too. If we're going to analyse his railing against his daughters with a focus on condemning Lear's characterisation, an authoritative and discerning context sentence might look like, nowhere is Lear's blind and foolishly rash action more criticised than in his childish rebuke of Goneril, after both she and Regan refuse to cave in to the selfish demands of their father, who has given his titles away. The imagery of festering, spreading disease is visceral, emphasising Lear's rage and outrage. All of the diseases mentioned, boil, plague, sore, carbuncle, leave long-lasting scars. The repetition of "my" highlights Lear's belief that his daughters belong to him and are his property, but also further enforces his domineering and blind attitude at this stage in the play, especially given that audiences know through dramatic irony that they are no longer loyal to their father. Shakespeare employs the common Jacobean metaphor of disease within the body of the king being representative of disease within the whole country, to alert all audiences to the idea that the source of this disruption is Lear himself. It could also be argued that the sisters are symptoms of Lear's spreading disease, evidenced through the literal interpretation of boil, plague sore and carbuncle as visible indicators of a more malicious disease. Shakespeare employs this metaphor to show that the disease has long been a result of Lear's blindness, and that the appearance of symptoms are now metaphorical indicators of his madness spreading. Another way of analysing and categorising this quotation within your thinking relates to gender, but beware here, as the wider concept is actually about natural and unnatural actions and order, rather than gender roles. In this scene, Shakespeare establishes that Lear, and perhaps much of his Britain, see women and sexuality as horrific and terrifying. The imagery of animals and disease serves to reinforce his belief that women who go against the natural order are monsters, while modern audiences might also blame Lear's blindness, cruelty, vanity, cold-hearted nature, parental neglect, creation of fighting between his daughters, etc. It is very apparent for both modern and Jacobean audiences that the threat of emasculation looms large for Lear, as Shakespeare characterises him as suspicious of women's deception. Audiences are then able to see that to be emasculated is perhaps the worst punishment that Lear can think of. As the act progresses, neither sister is willing to give in, and they team up against their father to deny him the servants he is asking for, decreasing the number from 50 to 25 to none. Remember that the servants that Lear wants to keep with him are symbols of more than just his authority. When Regan asks why he needs even one attendant, Lear bursts out, "Oh, reason not the need. Human nature," he says, "would be no different from that of animals if humans never needed more than the fundamental necessities of life." Clearly, Lear needs his servants not because of the service that they provide him, but because of what they represent, his importance as a man and the admiration that he craves, in essence, the identity that he has built for himself. Regan and Goneril, in denying Lear his servants, deny their father that which he needs the most, not what he needs to be a king, but what he believes he needs to be a human being. Ultimately, the sisters stand together to tell their father they will have him in their homes, but not his followers. Angry at their disrespect, Lear walks off into the storm. Lear's cry of "Oh fool, I shall go mad" foreshadows the fate that soon befalls him. There is much to analyse within his deteriorating character and the stage directions that identify the storm's arrival at the height of his poor choices and the turning point of his blindness to his elder daughter's malicious intentions. Gloucester protests weakly against Lear leaving and his children letting him go. But Cornwall has the final line for this act: "Shut up your doors, my lord, 'tis a wild night. My Regan counsels well, come out of the storm." Shakespeare's final line reinforces that the natural order has come completely undone. As Lear moves out into the unprotected heath away from his man-made and royal seat, it becomes clear to audiences that this character is about to receive punishments for his acts and must accept this punishment.